What's going on, everyone? Welcome to today's weather forecast for Thursday, April 6th, 2023. Taking a look here at the national outlook, you can see we still have the stall boundary, which we've been talking about all week. Remember, started off with the blizzard up in the North Plains, then we had some tornadoes in Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. And today, here's this stall boundary again. It's going to make a little bit more progress to the southeast today, but look at this plume of moisture that is setting up over Texas. Let's take a look at radar for that, shall we? Look at this. We have a huge plume of moisture. San Antonio, Austin, you're all getting into some moderate to heavy rainfall, and this is going to continue. Because if you look at radar real closely, you can see here there's actually a flow that's coming out of the southeast in Louisiana and in the Gulf, and that's more moisture that is pushing up against this stalled front. So you're really going to have some heavy rainfall amounts. And this has prompted for some flood watches to go up. There's flood watches from Texas on up into Tennessee, but really there's already a few flash flood warnings. There's some flood advisories, so this is a really complex setup, and unfortunately, as we've been talking about all week, this setup is going to continue eastward and eventually affect the Masters, which, yes, it's going to get not only rainy at the Masters, starting, there could be some showers this evening, but right on into the weekend, it's really going to get rainy, and unfortunately, the temperatures are going to drop into the 40s at times. Yeah. So let's take a look at the Storm Prediction Center here for this severe weather threats. But first, let's look back at yesterday. There are 3 reported tornadoes from yesterday. One in Texas, one in Indiana, one in Kentucky. That one in Kentucky apparently was fairly serious yesterday. There was also one early morning yesterday in Missouri. And that one did have some fatalities, unfortunately. It happened before the forecast period of yesterday. That's why I had to switch here to Tuesday morning's report. But yeah, yesterday was pretty active. 151 wind reports, 2 high wind reports, 34 hail, 3 large hail, 188 reports total. Overall, I would say the enhanced risk area that the Storm Prediction Center had yesterday, for the most part, did verify. Moving on to today's risk, there's a slight risk of severe weather across portions of North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and extreme South Jersey. It has shifted southeast a little further. The marginal risk goes up to Philadelphia. I mean, you could still hear thunder in Philadelphia. I'm not disagreeing with that, and we're definitely going to see some rain in the Philadelphia area and the southeast Pennsylvania area, but the best threat for severe weather has now shifted more southeast, at least according to the Storm Prediction Center. There is a marginal risk of severe weather today in Texas as that flow backs up against the front. A few cells could be potentially severe. There's no threat of tornadoes, or it's less than 2% in all areas today. You can't rule out a tornado in this slight risk area or down in Texas, but the threat today, the Storm Prediction Center is putting below 2%. 15% wind probabilities for portions of the slight risk area, and the marginal risk down in Texas is mainly for hail today. Let's take a look at the 12Z HRRR model, shall we? Here's the 12Z HRRR model. You can see here's our stalled boundary, and watch what happens. The stalled boundary remains. If you're up in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be a rainy day today. There may even be some high elevation mountain snows. Here's the thunderstorms that set up in the mid-Atlantic. Again, mainly southeast of Philadelphia, though there could be a period of heavy rain with these for Philadelphia and South Jersey. Wind is the biggest threat with any storm. And you can see here the front just remains stalled down here in Texas. And here's where I disagree with the SPC. Notice you get this inflow notch type thing, this flow, fire hose of moisture coming off the Gulf of Mexico. If you get a little pocket of rotation, which is possible, yes, there could be an isolated wind aspect or even an isolated tornado. It's not that great of a threat, but something you have to watch. The main threat down here in Texas and the Gulf Coast states is flash flooding. Watch what happens as I continue this. It just rains for hours and hours and hours. Then it moves southeast and eastward, and watch what happens. You actually do get some rain that sets up in the mid-Atlantic. That's not a bad thing. You can take any rain that you're going to get, because after this, it's going to get dry for a while. And watch what happens as we head into tomorrow night into Saturday. More showers down by the Masters, And look at this, an actual area of low pressure tries to develop, and it's just a really raw, chilly, wet pattern. Nothing like what you normally would see for April. Temperatures? Check this out. Here's the end of the HER model. Yeah, look at temperatures. The 40s, 50 at best. I mean, you're going down almost to extreme southern Georgia and Alabama, and you're looking at low 50s. You get into central Alabama, yes, these are 40s. Much of North Carolina, 40s. So, I mean, this is not a typical April pattern. And let's take a look at the NAM model. And the NAM, as you can see, here's the rain. It comes up. The front remains stalled. Then you have this flow off the Atlantic that tries to push into it. You have a Gulf flow. And your eyes are not deceiving you. The NAM is actually showing mountain snow. Probably overdone and off, but you know what? Who knows? If the temperatures are cold enough, take a look what the NAM has. NAM actually has a pocket of freezing temperatures in the mountains of North Carolina and Virginia. So anything is possible. This is a well below average setup. And take a look at the Pacific Northwest. If you take a look here to Seattle, yes, this is rain. You're in a fairly wet pattern in the Pacific Northwest. Finally, we get to Sunday, and this system finally clears off the coast. But look here, you have winds that remained on the coast, and you can see a low tries to get going. That low should, if it behaves correctly, it should slide out to sea on Sunday, and maybe Sunday ends up being a better day for the Masters, but can't really guarantee it. And Pacific Northwest, you continue to be in a wet pattern. And let's look beyond that, because that wet pattern in the Pacific Northwest, look at this. Seattle, you get several days of rain going into next week. Then another system comes. Then all eyes turn to the Gulf of Mexico. There's this low that the models are showing next week. Not really certain what this low is going to do yet. You're going to have a high above it. And some are saying it could become tropical. I think that's a little overdone, but who knows? There's going to be a low of some sort. It's going to provide for some very wet weather for portions of Louisiana. In fact, look at the rainfall amounts that the GFS is putting out here. You can see here, 2 to 4 inches of rain, and if it stays there longer, localized 5+ inches of rain. But again, there's some discrepancy in the models just where it's going to set up, how it's going to unfold. Because remember, you're going to have that high pressure. It's going to be northeast of it, which, by the way, over top this high, we're going to see very warm conditions in the east. And I will show that to you. Here's the ensemble, the European ensemble. And you can see here, this ridge of warm air starts to set up, but you have this unsettled pattern, which allows for cooler than average temperatures to continue in the next week along the Gulf Coast. But on top of this ridge, look at these really warm temperatures, 70s, 80s, maybe Texas later in the week, or northern Texas, maybe upper 80s, close to 90 degrees. Look at the Northeast, well above average temperatures. Spring will have sprung, and in many places it's going to feel more like June or mid-June, because it's not only going to be warm, there will probably be a little bit of humidity with this as well, at least along the coastal areas. Inland, we're going to have to watch. There could be a fire threat that potentially sets up next week. I wouldn't be surprised if there's red flag warnings that are up for the Northeast, and we'll continue this into late next week, and you can see all of next week, well above average in the north, finally starts to get a little warmer in the south by the end of next week. But look at the west coast, well below average temperatures, which is what we have been talking about for a while. The west is going to stay below average, and I could just continue to advance this here. We get into late next weekend, it's still above average in the east. I mean, we're looking at at least a 6 to 8 day warm up, maybe even as long as 10 days, but we'll go with 6 to 8 days right now. Let's take a look at the precipitation expected over the next 1 through 7 days. You can see that most precipitation expected in the southeast. Then again in the Pacific Northwest. Look at these amounts in the Pacific Northwest. 5 to 7 inches of rain. Then you take a look here at the Northeast. Just along the I-95 corridor in New Jersey, you get that little bit of rain from today's thunderstorms. The rest of the country, it's fairly dry. 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Well above average for much of the Great Lakes, the plains, and the Northeast. Below average in the West. Then on to 8 to 14 day, well above average in the Northeast and the East, below average in the West. Let's take a look at precipitation. Below average for Texas, that's good news. Well below average in the East and Northeast. Above average from Texas all the way up into the plains and northern plains. Then on the 8 to 14 day, it does change a little bit. You get slightly above average on the west coast. Above average continues in the plains, which is good news for the drought area, but look at the east and northeast, continuing to be below average. And in the long range, if I was to go out a month, I am starting to get a little bit concerned here about how dry it's starting to trend towards the east and northeast. And if this should continue, as we advance into the following month, into May, we might have to start concerning ourselves with the D word, drought. We'll take a look at the drought outlook for tomorrow. It is coming out today. We'll take a look at that tomorrow, and I'll show you why I might be concerned about that. Alright folks, that does it for today's weather update. If this is the first time you've been to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below. You'll get an update like this every day, and in times of severe weather, like later today with the slight risk, we do little shorts where we do updates on watches being issued or current storms that really look concerning. And if you like this video, hit thumbs up. So thumbs up and subscribe down below, and I will see you all again next time. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.